Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, Energized by Celsius. I am John Ledyard from pewterreport.com. I'm pumped today. We got a great guest coming on the show today to talk with me about my 2021 NFL quarterback rankings. You know, I've been hinting that this was coming, that these rankings were going to drop, and they did drop today over at pewterreport.com. We've got some thoughts on those rankings for sure that are out there in the Twitter world. Not too controversial is what I keep hearing. I'd be the first for me. I didn't know what, you never quite know what to expect when you drop these rankings. But as I'm talking with our guest for today, we kind of said this isn't a really controversial year for quarterback rankings. It kind of is what it is. And so there will be some squabbles, though, over certain players that I have ranked at certain spots, and we'll get to all of that on today's show. But first, wanted to let our listeners know, as we always do, about our title sponsor, Celsius Energy Drink. These things, man, I'm telling you, the flavors that they've got over at Celsius. And actually, our guest today, Mark Schofield, is a big Celsius fan as well. So I'll let him tell you about his experiences with Celsius. But I'm telling you, the sparkling watermelon is moving up for me. Every time I drink this baby, I like it more and more. Healthy energy, accelerates metabolism, burns body fat, no sugar, tons of great flavors. Check out Celsius.com or go to the banner ads at pewterreport.com. Click through there and order yourself some Celsius to try it out. It is some really, really, really good stuff. And also, if you love Celsius, and we know a lot of you, most of you at this point probably have already tried Celsius and fallen in love with it as we have, make sure you pay attention to a special opportunity we've got coming up on the show later. You're going to want to stick around for. It's an opportunity to win a case of your favorite Celsius energy drink flavor, as well as the hottest and tastiest new protein bar on the market. So make sure you stick around for that later on in the show. Speaking of hottest and tastiest new protein bars, let's bring in our guest for the show today. I don't know how that segue worked for you, Mark, but there you go. You have it. The audience.
No, it worked pretty well for me. I'm excited to be here on Celsius Report. Very excited to dive into our power rankings of Celsius flavors.
Well, listen, you laugh, but a lot of people listening will be like, it is like Celsius Report. They talk about Celsius so much.
And with good reason. The stuff is awesome. I mean, I'm not a huge grape flavor guy. Grape is tough to get right. But even their grape rush blew me away. I remember I slid into your DMs and I was like, man, grape is actually pretty good. Like, all the flavors are good. The watermelon you were just talking about is fantastic. But and I know, look, isn't there a new flavor coming out too?
Yeah, there is. Tropical Vibes coming out. I think it just dropped, actually. I had somebody telling me that they tried some. I don't have any yet. I'm checking the mail every day for some.
Seriously, I'm very excited for that.
Oh, me too. I mean, there's going to be some, I think there's some good flavors going to be wrapped up in that branding, I think, actually. So some spinoff flavors. So we'll see. I'm excited about that for sure. Also, man, I'm excited about this list we got going on here, this quarterback rankings list. I sent you my quarterback rankings for people who want to see it. It's over at pewterreport.com. You can pull up that list and you can admonish me as you see fit. But Mark, we talked about this when we were kind of prepping for the show. Oh man, it's a hard year to be controversial with these quarterbacks, right? I think it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, I think so. And when you reached out to me and said, look, I want you to come on, I'm going to be dropping my QB rankings, I was all excited because I'm like, I'm going to get a chance to rip Ledyard, right? Like, he's going to have some takes in here. I could just destroy him. It'll make for a great show. And then I read it and I reach back out to you. I'm like, it's going to be a boring show, man. Like, I'm in the process of doing something similar over a Touchdown Wire. And like I told you, my top 11, like I might move a guy here or there. It's basically the same. Also, I do love that you tier them. Like, I think that's a really good way to structure, particularly quarterback rankings, because guys can slide up or down. Like, you might move guys from 5 to 4 or something like that. But I do think that there are some guys that, like you said, they're the elite guys, like the guys at the top that if you need to win a game, these are the guys you're going to pick from. Then there's the guys that are knocking on that door, all three of them young passers that are extremely talented. One of them coming back from an injury, Dak Prescott. But those are guys that you expect might bust into that elite tier as some of the older guys that are in that top tier retire. And then the guys, that next group, I think, is where the sort of meat of the NFL is. The good starters that, look, you'll win games with these guys. They might be on their way up or on their way down, but they're guys that are going to, 1 week they'll throw for 3 touchdowns, and next week they might have a couple mistakes, but they're still guys that you really can count on. And so those top 3 tiers, I think, are really well done. then yeah, you've got some guys in the next couple of tiers that, like you said, you just don't know. You just don't know, like a Cam Newton. You just don't know. But overall, I think it's a really good list, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that some people on Twitter actually have liked it so far, which is more than most of my rankings and lists get. Even to get to some likes is nice. But no, right. I think that this was at the top, man. I mean, there was obviously, what Bucs fans kind of are interested in is where's Brady slotted. And I slotted him at 4th. And I wondered if some Bucs fans might push back, especially as Pro Football Focus ranked him 2nd, I believe, in their rankings of the top 32 quarterbacks in the league. And they included rookies in their rankings, by the way. So if you're making notes on the 2, I did not include rookies in these rankings because it's just too hard for me to make that comparison when they haven't played in the league yet. But yeah, I think, you could have Brady at 2, certainly. I think that Rodgers' play last year, I mean, MVP caliber play to me. Deshaun Watson was unbelievable in a horrible situation in Houston. Obviously, that team, I'm sure, goes 0-12 or 0-16 without him. I'm not sure that they win a game. So, I mean, you're squabbling when you're in the tiers. We've already said that, but where do you see Brady right now? You think that 4 is pretty fair spot for him?
Yeah, I mean, 4 is a pretty fair spot because let's not forget, you're talking about somebody that's 44 years old. I mean, right. You're going into uncharted territory here. I mean, I guess he'll turn 44 in August. He's a couple of months younger than me, so I got to do the math in my head, and I'm not good at math. But yeah, I mean, there's uncharted, territory here.
Right.
You could have an injury. He was dealing with an injury last year, and so there's an opportunity where if he has another injury, maybe he doesn't put up huge numbers. But there is a case to be made, sort of on what PFF did, to say that he's perhaps a number 2. And that case is this. Remember when I first came on with you, like after they lost to Kansas City in the regular season, and we were talking about problems with the playbook, problems with getting on the same page, blitzes, hots, and things like that. Mm-hmm. Brady basically came out and said all of that in this offseason. Said he was still learning the terminology, still learning the plays, the playbook, and how Arians and Leftwich sort of structured the offense conceptually. There's a chance that if he's healthy, he's even better than he was last year, which is probably scary to think about. And so there is a case to be made that if he is healthy, everything that's around him, they have such a great duo of receivers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, all the other talent they have, that Brady could be the second best quarterback in the NFL. You have to hedge against it because of the age, obviously. But yeah, I mean, whether it's 4, whether it's 2, he's still one of the best in the game.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point to make about this upcoming season. Obviously, we've talked a lot about that on this show, just anticipating some level of growth and improvement there, obviously. But Tom Bucs fan makes a good point here that Chris Sims rated, I think it was Chris Sims, rated Brady 10th, had Stafford in the top 5. Could you envision making a list? Is there ever been a year where Brady would have been behind Stafford for you? I know neither of us would agree with this ranking. No.
And I mean, you go back even some of Stafford's better years. I mean, I've always been really high on Stafford. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, you asked people to rank their top 5 on Twitter, and I had Stafford in at 5 over Matt Ryan, and I'm not welcome back in Atlanta since then. Falcons fans were not happy with that. So even when I'm high on Stafford, I'm still relatively higher on Brady. I just think Stafford is an incredibly talented quarterback, and I think you've got him 9th. That's around where I'd have him, maybe 10th, something like that. Still a very talented quarterback, and I think he's going to do numbers under McVay. I think he's going to be in a very favorable system. But I couldn't imagine right now. I mean, the only way I could make a case that, you put Brady at 10 is you're really worried about an injury. Mm-hmm. But even with an injured knee, what did he do last year? He went out and won a Super Bowl. And so, I mean, it's like I said, if you hedge with Brady, you hedge and put him at like 4 or 5, not 9, 10.
Right. That's where I would say. I mean, if you even account for some level decline or other guys being younger, maybe – we don't even know if Rodgers or Watson are going to play this year. I mean,
those are 2 huge question marks. I mean,
have we ever seen anything like this, Mark? I mean, we're about to go into an – it's not like this is March. Like, we're about to be in July.
It's July here. I mean, and we don't know if 2 of the games most elite quarterbacks are going to be played. I mean, obviously, it's 2 wildly different scenarios, right? With Rodgers, it's a contract, and he's unhappy with the organization. With Watson, it's a legal situation that is in civil litigation, and not to be a lawyer for a few minutes here, but civil litigation moves slower. So there's a chance here that this isn't resolved come August, and then the league has to step in and say, we can't let this guy see the field with all this lingering. And so, 2 different situations, but we might see 2 guys sit out.
Right. Yeah. For those who don't know, Mark is a lawyer by trade. So that when he speaks to that, he's speaking with knowledge. And I always ask him whenever these situations come up.
Right. Like Zaven Collins, like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, like Zaven Collins 5 minutes ago. I'm like, hey, Mark, what happens with a guy how reckless do you have to be driving to be arrested for it? Because your boy's done some speeding before, but I don't know if I don't think I've ever been arrested. I mean, I hope I've never been close to being arrested for my driving, but
no, you always have to.
You have to be in a rough spot to do that. I was going to say. So, yeah. So you look at this situation now anyway with the quarterbacks, obviously, and you mentioned Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers. And I just can't believe that we are at number 2 and number 3 on my list anyway in the league. And it is about to be July. I mean, we're rolling into July here and training camp is going to start. Like you said, there is a difference in the situations with Watson's obviously, but you also have the layer of Watson before any of the off the field stuff was going on. You had Watson kind of not knowing whether he
didn't want to be there. And he basically asked for a trade. And, then this situation sort of got dropped on Houston's head. So I can't imagine an organization right now, like say Carolina or Denver, like 2 teams that were sort of linked to Deshaun Watson, saying, yeah, we're going to go trade for this guy, but this situation sort of lingering out there and all this uncertainty around him. It's hard to imagine putting together the kind of package that a Deshaun Watson might cost in a trade, future first, quality players, defensive players. That was a rumor that Houston wanted a good defensive blue chip type player in return. Putting a package like that together for a guy that you don't know is going to be there week 1, week 2, week 5, whatever. So the Watson situation is extremely complex, a lot of moving parts, 22 allegations against him. And, the attorney for the 22 plaintiffs that have filed this joint lawsuit came out and said, look, there's no settlement talks. Like there's no quick resolution. Like we are pursuing this and we're going to go through discovery and all of that. And that stuff takes time. Like, you always hear the phrase, right to a speedy trial. That's in a criminal court, right? Like with Zaven Collins, he might be facing that in a couple of weeks here. Who knows? But civil litigation is wildly different. The clock moves slower. The deadlines are more extended. Discovery takes a very long time. Talking about like depositions of all 22 of these plaintiffs, like it could really linger into the fall, into the winter. And with that hanging out there, it's hard to imagine Watson. But like you said, John, he didn't want to play for Houston anyway. So
that adds a whole other layer.
Yeah, because can't imagine him being in the Houston Texans uniform again, no matter what happens.
Yeah, and if he's not in a Texans uniform, who is going to want to trade for him, and why would the Texans want to move him with anything hanging over his quote unquote stock?
Because you probably won't get his value in return right now.
Exactly right.
You have to wait and hope that this somehow gets resolved favorably for Deshaun Watson without a commissioner's exempt list, without potentially, criminal liability coming into play, because that's still potentially out there. Right. You have to hope for like a very good resolution from Watson's perspective to get in return what, you should for trading.
To me, I would just be floored if Watson plays this season. It's hard to envision a scenario where that happens. Rodgers, on the other hand, his situation is, for me, I look at the situation, Mark, and I've said this before on the show, so apologize to people who've heard it before, but I don't know if you're Green Bay where you Rodgers, I just don't see him as being the kind of guy that just like, yeah, that's fine, and come back. Like, that's not who – we kind of know Rodgers at this point, right? He's been in the limelight for years. Like, we know who he is as a person a little bit. We know how he handles these things. He's a grudge guy. He just is. And when I said this, when Brady got snubbed and his mind snubbed, he wasn't obviously as reputable as Rodgers going to the draft. And he was all the way down there and, being a 6th round pick or whatever. And he came and he was like, I'm going to prove to everybody that they're wrong. It was a competitive thing. It wasn't an anger thing. You know what I mean? Like he's been able to laugh about, you know what I mean? Like it's been Rodgers, I think, was just genuinely pissed for years. Like, I just think that's where Rodgers was with the whole thing.
I think he's been angry since his draft night, and that hasn't gone away. And that chip on his shoulder is just getting bigger. And look, you don't get to be one of the elite quarterbacks in this game if you don't have that ability to self-motivate. And, whether you go about it in sort of a humorous way at times, or you're just maniacally driven at times. I don't know if you saw the story that Cliff Kingsbury told about Brady at that friend's wedding down in the Caribbean, where they were out getting annihilated until 4 in the morning, and then Brady's out there at 6:30 the next morning in pads throwing. You have to be that level of driven, and you have to find ways to self-motivate to get yourself out of bed at Saturday at 6:30 in the morning when you're supposed to be having a fun time. Brady does it, Rodgers does it, all these guys do it. But you're right, John. With Rodgers, it does seem like there's that undercurrent of anger to it. Like, I am just angry at the world for passing on me. Now this organization that drafted me, they made me wait behind Brett Favre. And, finally I get a chance to take over. We win a Super Bowl. We're now back on the cusp of Super Bowls. And you're going to draft Jordan Love. Like, you're going to trade up to go get him. And he's talking about how he poured himself 4 fingers of tequila that night. Like, yeah, he's mad about it. And I don't see him going back. Like, I don't see how he could do all this, especially, look, he's clearly got interests outside of the game of football, right? He could go host Jeopardy. Everybody thought he did a fantastic job doing that. He could go do other things. I'm sure he's a very marketable, talented guy away from the field of football. So he might just say, look, I'm done. I'm going to go do something else. Like, I'm not coming back to this organization that I feel hasn't done right by me, given everything I've brought to this organization.
I think you're exactly right. I think that's what he will do. So if that's the case in your Green Bay, you have to trade him, right? Like, you have to move this guy. You cannot let him even sit for a year and depreciate in value whatsoever. He is an MVP. He is an older MVP. Like, if you let him sit and retire and go host Jeopardy, his value is going to plummet. Like, who's going to know what kind of condition, what kind of shape? He's going to have a year less on his contract. He's going to be a year older. Like, you have to move now in this window here of time before the season starts, and really almost before training camp starts to me, because teams are going to want to get him in and get him in the door and get him in the offense. And at that point in time, at least, I mean,
and you're going to want to have, as the Packers, some resolution on it as well. I mean, you can't have this situation linger into July and August when, Jordan Love is running the show, but every question he gets asked, or every question every member of that organization asks is, okay, when's 12 going to show up? Is 12 going to come? What do you think they should do? Right. It's going to be this massive distraction. So I think you're right, John. They have to find some way to resolve this in the next couple of weeks here. If this does linger into training camp without a resolution and he's still sort of out there, it's going to be a problem, because if indeed you have to make the switch to Jordan Love as an organization, you have to put everything behind that. If you have to go ahead and do that, and having this sort of situation lingering, it just doesn't bode well. If you then have to make the switch to Jordan Love, it's not going to put him in a position to be successful. And as an organization, if you have to do that, you have to do the best by Love now. So that means, I think, a resolution either via trade or some other way to get this done before camp.
Right. And get a ton of resources, which you will. If you can trade him now, you'll get a ton of resources. Even if you only have 1 or 2 suitors at this point, you'll still get something from a team like Denver. I mean, you could still get a lot from them.
You could absolutely get a ton from Denver.
That could be huge for building around Jordan Love. I mean, huge.
Yeah. I mean, because, the reason why you want that rookie quarterback in the organization is to then build around them, right? They're cost controlled on that first contract for the first 4 or 5 years with the option, and to be able to sort of add maybe some players and a couple of future first round picks to put around Jordan Love for the duration of his contract, that next 2 to 3 years. That's massive. I mean, this is a team that's off back-to-back NFC championship games.
Right.
Yeah, you'll be losing Aaron Rodgers, but it's still a pretty talented roster. They also have Devontae Adams out there lingering. Like, that's, a year away from now, his contract status. But say, you don't re-sign him. Now you have an opportunity to add another receiver or 2 with those picks, or maybe you get one from Denver. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, that would be favorable to build around Jordan Love, the assets they get in return.
Right, absolutely. And I think if you're Green Bay, it's not anymore about whether Rodgers is better than Love or will be, how good Love will be. You kind of made that call. You made that bet when you drafted Love. That's just what it is. I mean, you drafted in the first round and you traded up for him. It's not even a second round pick. It's not a 7th round pick. It's not it's not a flyer. That's your guy. Like, when you do that, that's your guy. And so you have to be able to back that up with, even if I'm sure Jordan Love didn't look great last year. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that Jordan Love probably didn't look great in practices last year. He was behind Tim Boyle, and I get it, experience and all that stuff. But listen, if you trade up for a guy in the first round, you'd love him to be able to beat out a Tim Boyle even as a rookie. That's facts. I'm not making that up. That's just what it is. Now, Jordan Love, we've seen some good reports and some really ugly reports from minicamp, and so we'll see. I mean, who knows? I mean, you and I definitely had questions, I know, when he was coming out, but bottom line is how this all ripple effects to the Bucs, obviously, is that with Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay is probably the biggest obstacle, with all due respect to the Rams. Green Bay is probably the biggest obstacle to Tampa Bay being able to reach the Super Bowl and potentially even be in a position at least to repeat as Super Bowl champions. So the biggest NFC obstacle in their way. Without Aaron Rodgers, even though Green Bay still has a good team, they're an afterthought right now until Jordan Love proves something. they don't play the Bucs obviously in the regular season, but they're an afterthought in terms of that. Like, I wouldn't consider them in the competition. So it's a huge move that's going to have a lot of ripple effects in the NFC. But obviously, if it goes to an AFC team, as most people expect as well, it feels like to me a matter of time rather than if. But
yeah, I think so too. I mean, the one thing to sort of consider, if he goes to Denver, you've got Rodgers, Mahomes, and Justin Herbert in that division. Like those are three talented quarterbacks. I mean, you've got Herbert, in that sort of third tier, right? You've got him at 13. That's a talented division of quarterbacks. And another guy, Derek Carr, is in that next tier near the top of that list. Like,
you could easily argue 4 top 15 quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, that's suddenly a stacked division of QB. Yeah, right. And so, and if you're the Denver Broncos, and we've talked about this, John, you've got Sutton, you've got Fant, you've got Hamler, you've got Judy, you added Williams in the draft. Like, you've got the pieces on offense, but are you going to really entrust them to Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater in that division? Because let's face it, you're going to score points. Right. Like, you're going to score points to keep up with Mahomes. Now, to keep up with Justin Herbert, I think you got to stay away if you can get Aaron Rodgers in there.
Just imagine going from Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater to Aaron Rodgers with like the week before training camp. I mean, think how the whole vibe changes in the locker room. Like, whether guys say it or not, like,
the division changes, the conference outlook changes because right now, look, you could say in the AFC, right? Buffalo, Baltimore, obviously Kansas City. Those are the teams you probably look at. Cleveland, they really did a number of good things this past offseason. Tennessee with the Julio Jones trade, like, they're going to be in the mix. If Indy gets something from Carson Wentz, you add Aaron Rodgers to Denver, the AFC is suddenly loaded. Like,
I mean, Broncos are making the playoffs. Broncos. You're there. Yeah. So you literally, somebody's out. Like, that's to me the type of move they'd make. Like, because I think the whole roster is good. Even if the coaching is just like, okay, and we know Fangio is a good defensive coach, they're going to be competent defensively. They added a bunch of pieces. If you get Rodgers, you're making the playoffs. Minimum is playoffs. Beyond that, we'll see how quickly
they gel. One of those teams out too.
Yeah, that's right.
Like you said, like, a really good team might be on the outside looking in as a result of that move.
Yeah, AFC just becomes more and more loaded. NFC becomes more and more filled with question marks in my mind. So we'll see what happens.
If you're a Tampa Bay fan, though,
it's great if you're a Bucs fan for sure. Somebody asked me to address the Dak Prescott, Josh Allen ranking. To me, this is one of the ones that everybody kind of, people look at the rankings and they kind of jump on one, right? Like, they grab one and they're like, oh, these two guys, for whatever reason, they match up in their head. I don't know why Dak Prescott and Josh Allen, people said, but I think most rankings have a hard time maybe differentiating them. There's this recency bias with Josh Allen. I don't even say that in a bad way. He was phenomenal.
He was fantastic last year.
Right. And Dak obviously hurting the ankle and not playing. And so, there's this, what has Dak done in his career type of thing. There's this Josh Allen situation. To me, Josh Allen has been in one of the best situations in the NFL, especially over the last 2 years. I think his situation is, in terms of scheme, coaching, play calling, protection, obviously receiving talent last year was off the chain. I mean, they do things that are innovative. He's been just in an unbelievable, ton of play action. I think Dak Prescott's situation has been highly concerning throughout his career. Last year, I think there were some steps in the right direction, but we didn't get to see a ton of it before he got hurt, but he was unbelievable last year before he got hurt. And playing with just a bottom tier all-time defense over those weeks before he got hurt. To me, I think it's just consistency with Dak. I've seen him do this for several years now, play at a high level. He's never really played at a bad level. Josh Allen was bad as a rookie, okay as a second year, and then just huge leap to a great player, an MVP caliber candidate. I just want to see the stability of it, not saying that he's necessarily better or worse. That's one question mark. The other question mark I have is that I think Josh Allen takes a lot of time in the pocket to do things, and sometimes he ends up having to go out of structure, and he can thrive there too. So it's to his credit. I wonder what happens if he starts getting more pressure in his career and the offensive line isn't quite as good as it's been, or if Dable leaves and they're not quite as play action heavy as they've been, how he's able to play, just because we have not seen a lot of great Josh Allen, even in college. Like, he was not very good. And so it's still fair to kind of wonder, if the situation around him changes, how stable is this level of play for him, because we've seen so little of it, where with Dak, we've seen, him just consistently get better and better and better as he's been an NFL player and really always play at a good level. So that was a big part of it for me. How do you differentiate these two guys that everybody seems to be putting head to head this offseason?
I'm in large part, I'm there with you, John. I mean, these are the next two. I mean, I think in my book, in your book, they're the next two. And if you want to say, look, because of what he did last year, then the questions about Dak's ankle, that no, Josh Allen is 6 and Dak is 7. I mean, okay. But I think the consistency argument is a great argument in Dak's favor. I think if you watch him on film last year before he got hurt, you were seeing some incredible anticipation throws to the middle, the attacking zone, attacking man, working through reads quickly, getting the ball out, and really just carrying that team that, like you said, was defensively they couldn't stop anybody. And so they had to put up 30, 35, 40 points a game to hang in with some of those games before he got hurt. Now, with Allen, look, you had the 2 years where it's like, yeah, you could see the talent there. And, he's better than a lot of people, myself included, thought he was coming out. A lot of us had questions about Josh Allen. Yeah. And he seemed to sort of answer. But then you have this huge leap last year. And I think what's helped him is, like you said, consistency and play caller with Brian Daboll being at his side the entire time. Like that's really helped him. And if you want to take sort of lessons as another organization from how do we make our guy the next Josh Allen, look at that relationship, right? And so all these Giants fans are saying, look, Daniel Jones is going to make that year 3 leap. He's on his 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years, like 4 years going back to his time at Duke. Like there's a lot of changes there that he's had to sort of work through. With Josh Allen, that consistency in coaching has really helped him. I think one argument in Allen's favor is last year at the start of the year, teams like Miami and others were really throwing a lot of man coverage at him, and he picked it apart. Then teams like Tennessee, for example, Kansas City in the regular season threw more zone coverage at him, and he sort of struggled with it. But then you watch that Niners game where they threw a lot of zone at him, and he sort of clicked in his head. You could see him attacking the middle of the field, making those anticipation throws, getting the ball out quickly. And it seems like, okay, it took us some time, but he figured that out. So it does seem like he now has that answer. If you're thinking, oh, well, he's going to regress because teams will have film on him now. He went through that process last year and he sort of figured it out. Right. But these are two of like the young guns that I think will get into that elite tier. Right. When you get like Rodgers and Brady, sort of falling out because of retirement, if they ever retire. I mean, maybe, Rodgers retires first. Who knows? Right. But, these are two very good quarterbacks. I'm with you. I'd have Dak above Allen because of the consistency over the length of their careers. But if somebody, a Bills fan or otherwise, says, no, I'd rather put Josh Allen there. Like, okay, right. I mean, I get it. But they're like the next two. Put them in any order you want, really.
Within the tiers, it's squat. We're really. I know people hate that. People don't like to say, like, for example, if you want to compare Derek Carr and Dak Prescott, okay, I'm convinced that Dak Prescott is a better quarterback than Derek Carr, and like that to me is not debatable. But like Dak and Josh Allen, that's debatable to me. Like Dak and Russell Wilson, if you want to debate that, or I think these things are kind of debatable. Like even across some of the tiers at the very top, like I could see Russell Wilson the way he was kind of at the end of last season, the way that he struggled. Like it's not crazy to me if you want to say, oh, I think Dak's going to be a top 3 quarterback next year. That's not crazy to me. So we just have to kind of normalize these things being really close and splitting hairs in a lot of ways, because that just is what it is, as much as we like to really rank everything.
I think perfectly. Generally this year, like we talked about, we sort of alluded to it at the start, quarterback rankings right now aren't controversial.
Yeah.
Like they're just really not. Like I feel most people are sort of on the same general page.
Yeah.
It's not like receivers, right? Like receiver rankings are much tougher, especially if you're trying to keep it to like a top 10 or something like that.
Right.
Because there are so many, and you could even try to like differentiate like slot guys versus outside guys and things like that. But still,
even that's becoming tough
because the way teams are schematically having guys that are, inside on the slot for a lot of the time, but then you put them on the outside because of the flexibility, versatility of some of these players. So I think it's much tougher to do receiver right now. Like a couple of years ago, quarterback was tough. Now it's like, You look at lists like this, and it's like, unless you're doing something like putting Jalen Hurts in the top 5, like
it's hard.
It's not really gonna like move the needle too much.
Right. Two guys it feels like you can never rank right is Lamar Jackson and Ryan Tannehill to me. Like Lamar Jackson supporters will always say he won the MVP, like he's done this, especially this amount of combined yards, combined offense. Like he's clearly the best player on Baltimore's offense. He's not had this unreal supporting cast over his time there. Obviously, a lot of stability on the coaching front, but people will point to that. His supporters, his detractors will say Oh, I mean, I just don't know passing wise. Has he been exposed? Like, he's not been great outside the numbers. It's been his concern going back to college. It's still a concern in the NFL today. It seems like he's run into some situations where he's been fooled a little bit and he's had to rely on his legs a little bit more. And also I think where he's held the ball a little bit in the pocket, and he's also had brilliant moments and huge brilliant moments. And I don't know that there's been stability for him as a passer yet, but there has been so much success. To me, he is the best athlete in the NFL. And with the ball in his hands, there's nobody more dangerous in the league. And we have to start understanding that value is really huge.
That's why I'm like so high on Lamar. Like, again, I haven't been like that second tier.
Yeah.
But I think he's also somebody that could crash that elite, party.
Right.
At any time. I always try to put my mind in like, okay, you're Bill Belichick and you've got to go up against the Baltimore Ravens this week. Like, what are you going to do conceptually, schematically against a guy like Lamar Jackson? Like, how do you try to defend this guy? Because so much of what they do offensively, the Ravens, is built off just how talented he is, both as a runner, an athlete, and as a passer. And it makes it tough. Like, who would you rather defend? Like, you could even say that, like, look, Tom Brady versus Lamar Jackson. Like, we have Brady in that elite category, but you know what you're going to get, right? Like, you know you're going to get quick decisions, accurate throws to all levels of the field. Like, okay, that that. But with Lamar, there's a lot more uncertainty, a lot more things you have to account for. And the numbers game changes. On 3rd and 6, are you going to spy Tom Brady?
Yeah.
No. Are you going to spy Lamar Jackson? You probably have to, which means the numbers now aren't in your favor. And yeah, maybe he's not as great a passer as Tom Brady for sure, but he can do things that Tom Brady can't. Brady can do things that Lamar Jackson can't, but that stuff's going to keep you up at night. And so Lamar Jackson, yes, he hasn't been as consistent in the passing games I think people would like to see, but he's still that kind of offensive weapon that will keep defensive coordinators up at night and can turn a game around on a dime.
Yeah. Also, he's still pretty young, and if he ever finds that consistency in the passing game, his team's probably going to win a Super Bowl because he's that unbelievable with his legs. I mean, I really just think he's just special with the ball. Like, it's so it
dated back to his time at Louisville. I know there was a lot of concern about, he's not going to last, right? He's got the thin frame, like he's going to get beat up. But you remember him coming out. He was so smart at taking care of himself. Like, he has that home run hitter ability as a runner. But he'll slide, he'll get down, like he'll get out of bounds. Like, he takes care of himself, doesn't expose himself to a ton of huge hits, even though he runs the ball a ton.
Nobody really hits him square. Like, you never see him get blown up.
Hard. He's like those change of direction skills where you just can't square him up. I mean, it's like trying to catch a knuckleball. Like, what was the Bob Uecker line? You wait for it to stop rolling, pick it up.
Yeah.
That's kind of like trying to tackle Lamar.
That's exactly right, and it becomes a cheat code almost. I mean, honestly, like I said this before he was drafted. I go on radio shows and they'd ask me what I thought of Lamar Jackson. I'd say I think his consistency can be improved, but the reality is that he could have a bad process on a play. Like, you could look back in the tape and be like, oh, he maybe should have done this or that, and he can achieve like an elite result, not just a positive result. Like, he can literally.
He was kind of the start of the whole like change in the process versus results argument, right? Because usually you study quarterbacks like, oh, what is he thinking? What are his decisions? Like, why did he do that? You can't do that at the NFL. And then you see, Lamar, you see Kyler Murray, and it's like, if the process is bad, it doesn't matter because they're in the end zone and you're wondering how in the world they got there.
Right. Oh, for sure. And Tannehill is kind of, we don't have to spend a ton of time on him, but Tannehill's just like, Titans fans believe that he should be in the top 10 now. And I just don't know if he's played well enough in the big games that matter, like in the playoffs and stuff. Like, what happens when the offense is on his back, when they need a big game? I don't know if he's that guy. Like, I mean, really
he had one like that last year, but it was against Houston, right?
Yeah,
so it doesn't quite count. I mean, I think he's like that fringe 10, like he's, like 10, 11 for me. I think there are some things that he does extremely well. RPOs, throws off play action, things like that. I do wonder, though, the departure of Arthur Smith. Like, are we going to see that same level of execution there? Because there are some things he does extremely well. And obviously, look, you've got Derrick Henry, the looming threat of him. Helps their play action passing game. Julio Jones is certainly going to help. You lose Arthur Smith, though. Jonnu Smith is gone as well. So much of their 12 personnel stuff, those heavier sets, are they going to be as tight end heavy without Smith? I don't know. So there are some question marks. I do think he's like a 10, 11 guy. Which, look, a couple of years ago, if you said Ryan Tannehill was going to be like a fringe top 10 quarterback, people thought you were insane. But he's certainly turned things around in Tennessee. And he's
Right.
one of the better quarterbacks in the AFC, if not the entire NFL, top 10,
for sure.
top 12 guy.
Right.
But it's just a question of, are we going to see that same Ryan Tannehill this year with some of the departures we've seen? Yes, Julio was a great addition, but he's one player. They lost an OC. They lost, John O. Smith. Those are some big departures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's been a huge change. I think that they're going to have to see how all that comes together because, right now I look at Julio and A.J. Brown and I say, this team's probably going to want to throw the ball a lot. And I don't know whether, I would think. And so we'll see if they end up playing that way or not. But you'd hope that they'd be given him more opportunities, and then we'll see how he performs kind of in that situation. Yeah. Great analysis. I've already kept you longer than I said, Mark. I'll get back to one more to wrap it up here in a second, but I want to let people know where you can find more great analysis is over at Locker Room. It's changing the way we talk about sports. It's the only place for live audio conversations about the takes, rumors, news, and teams you care about. React to sports news as it happens, gather all your friends and watch parties for the biggest games, rep your favorite teams, and find your community. Better sports talk is just a tap away. Download on the Apple App Store and join the conversation. Locker Room just recently bought by Spotify.
Big stuff happening there.
Yeah,
man.
They're calling it Green Room, I think.
I know. It's changing up, rebrand. I mean,
so wait, can Android users get on there now?
I hope so.
I'm not sure. I don't know if y'all can get on there or not. I think Clubhouse is over there now. I don't know what's going on.
I'm all this stuff freaking me out, man.
I know. I'm trying to catch up with all the changing trends here. I'm getting too old for this. But, okay, I'm going to ask you before I let you go here about obviously the rookies, Burrow and Herbert. It becomes kind of, okay, everybody sees them as like these guys are going to be great, but I think for the most part, but we just want to see the consistency. So kind of self-explanatory with those guys a little bit. But one of the players who's lower for me than I think some people would have him is Kyler Murray. I know we've talked about this in our group chat a lot with Kyler. I'm just not sure the reputation has ever quite been what actually happens on the field with him. Obviously number one overall pick, some of that is going to, come in time, I think, but as he gets older, I'm also not quite sure about the coaching there at some points. I just think consistency just seems like it's a big struggle for him. I've seen him in some games against top tier defenses where he just looks like everything's moving too fast for him. He's holding the ball too long. He makes some poor decisions, throws the ball into coverage. There's some inaccurate throws, especially over the middle of the field. I think he just still has a good way to grow, and I'm not sure the current regime is going to get him there. Yeah,
I share a lot of those concerns, John. I do think, though, you have to sort of look at what Cliff Kingsbury has done conceptually. And I think there are some things that he started to figure out at the end of the year that he wasn't doing enough of. And the main thing was DeAndre Hopkins was lined up in the left boundary like almost every snap. Like, yes, he's a fantastic wide receiver, top 3, top 5, wherever you want to rank him. He's one of the game's best. Yeah. You still that doesn't mean you just put him there and say, look, go win. Like, you move him around. Like, they didn't do enough of that. They didn't do enough of, the movement stuff pre-snap to give Murray those indicators. They were a very sort of static offense at times. Near the end of the season, you started to see, okay, Hopkins in the right slot, Hopkins on the right side, Hopkins in motion, Hopkins in the left slot. I think that Cliff Kingsbury started to figure out that, look, my offense is good on paper, but I've got to do some more stuff to help my quarterback and help my players. They're great players, but you can't be static. You can't just say, look, go out there, run mirror, curl flat or slant flat and expect guys to win. Not against the talent you're going to see in the NFL. And so I think there's been a sort of process of self-discovery from Cliff that is going to pan out, but that will, I hope, have a good effect on Murray because, like you said, the lack of consistency is troubling. Struggles against better defenses. Even though, look, they won that Buffalo game. Like, there were some struggles in that game. There were some struggles in some other games. There were some moments against Miami, for example, where he could have played better, but he didn't. The loss at New England when New England's defense wasn't as good as people thought it was going to be going into last year. That he could play better. He still makes some wild moments. Like there are still some moments where you're like he had a throw in that New England game to move the chains on third down with Darren Arnold, where I was just like, how do you defend it? Like you just can't. It's like the Lamar conversation from earlier. But he needs to do more on a week in, week out basis. You can't be such a high variance quarterback. You've got to have some stability and consistency.
Right. That's one of the tricky things. That's one that separates the tier 3 and tier 4 guys from the tier 1, tier 2. Most of the time, most of those guys are capable of great games, even a great season. You look at tier 5 here. I mean, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz. Like
we struggle to find 32 people to do this job.
Yeah.
Like, so if you get to this point, like where you're an NFL starting quarterback, like you could do the job.
You're a baller,
right? Right. You're a baller, but like you got to be able to do it all 17 games, not just like 8 of the 17.
Right, for sure. Last one for you is just Jameis Winston, Saints. He's down there 25 for me. Bucs fans probably want to hear what your thoughts are with him in that offense if he does indeed win the starting job. Obviously, you know what the Saints did last year. I think they were last in the league in deep passes, and obviously a lot of had to do with Breeze. But you also look at them and you don't see like a lot of vertical threats, burner types. Their tight end position is weaker than it's been maybe in Sean Payton's time there. I don't know when last time it was this big of a question mark. You have Michael Thomas, and I think Traquan Smith's done some nice things, but you don't really have much in the way of vertical threat. Even Thomas, that's not been his bread and butter. How does this all fit together in New Orleans with Jameis?
I don't know, because I mean, you look at Jameis, you think more vertical based quarterback, like a guy's going to push the ball downfield, very aggressive, willing to take chances. And what sort of scares me about Winston, in that kind of offense where he's making quicker reads or asked to make quicker reads, quicker throws and things like that. He really struggled that last season at Tampa Bay. Like, now I remember one play through pick 6, Deion Jones jumped a stick route. And it's like he hit his drop and just sort of like looked at it. And the ball just comes out slower. And he knows where he's going with it. Like he's made up his mind pretty much pre-snap. But just the sort of decision to throw seemed a bit elongated, that process from Winston. And if he's going to be in an offense like we anticipate, like you talked about, John, in New Orleans, it's going to be underneath, short game stuff, quick game stuff. And he's struggling to read that at Tampa Bay. It's hard to see that coming together well. Now, the best case scenario is this year off gave him a chance to sort of like catch his breath, figure out, look, man, this is what I need to do. Like, this is how the position needs to be played. Like, if you're going to learn from somebody, like learning from Drew Brees is probably a good way to go about it. And so you could see a path where like it clicks, but he's been in the league for a while. And this isn't a strength of his, I don't think. So it's hard to see it coming together. Maybe it does. I hope it does. Cause I think there's still a good quarterback to be found inside of Jameis. But I need to see it before I'll believe it.
Right. That's how I am too. I mean, everybody will admit that he's a talented, fun player to watch. He's not like a boring quarterback for sure.
Not.
But
definitely not boring.
Right. But we have seen the same problems going back to college, and they just haven't changed or gotten better. And so it is definitely firmly in the believe it when I see it conversation for me. That's just how I feel about Jameis. So good points there. Pewter Report fans, we did promise earlier in the show that we would tell you about a special opportunity to win some free Celsius, and now the time has come. The Pewter Report podcast is excited to announce a brand new giveaway with Celsius and Fast Brands, in which 10 winners will receive 1 box of Fast protein bars, the salted caramel peanut crunch, or the white chocolate cookies and cream protein bars, and you'll receive 1 box of those and 1 case of your preferred flavor Celsius energy drink. Who knows? Maybe even a little watermelon. We'll have to see what you come up with. But to enter, all you have to do is go to www.celsius.com/pewter. That's it. And enter your name and your email. It's really that simple. And the link is in the YouTube. It's going to be in the YouTube description below as well. But grab that link and do it now, though, because today is actually the last day. The giveaway winners will be selected tomorrow. So today's the last day to enter. Let that deadline spur you to action. Get in there. Get yourself a chance to be one of 10 people who are going to win a box of these protein bars and a case of your favorite flavor of Celsius. It's great stuff from them. Don't miss out on it for sure. Mark,
I just signed a refund. I just sent in a little... Because he's been hounded you for some free products.
That's right. I was going to say, send him the link, and you got to jump in there too. You got to get in there.
I'm doing it too.
All right, good. Glad everybody's in there. But yeah, we'll pick 10 of those winners. Those winners, Celsius will pick them, and they'll pick them tomorrow. So it should be good stuff. But appreciate you coming on, man. Appreciate you taking the time, more time than we said. Once we get talking quarterbacks, time goes fast. So that's right.
No, man, but this was a blast. Always fun to catch up with you, John. Always fun to talk about quarterbacks. Like I said, I mean, I wish I could have come in here and like ripped your takes, but they're good takes. It's a solid list. It's a solid group of tiers. I think you did a really good job with it. Like you said, if people want to quibble like 4 versus 5, 6 versus 8, whatever, but the tiers are solid. It's well done work. And this is why you're just crushing it down a Pewter Report, man.
I appreciate it, sir. It means a lot for sure. It's been fun to compile these things. We'll keep doing these rankings lists, but tomorrow on the show, we're talking about my Bucs briefing column, and it's going to be Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, who is better. So Bucs fans, Come with your takes. We're not sitting on the fence. I know we could sit on the fence. Both of them are great. We're not sitting on the fence. You got to, Bucs fans, if you don't know now, go do the research, go look up a few stats, come to the show tomorrow and let me know why you're making a case.
I got a preview of this. I got a preview of this last week, and I know the takes are going to be spicy.
It's going to be spicy. Tomorrow's Bucs briefing call will be spicy. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll have fun with two great players. We start at that point, right? But we'll have fun breaking down why I think one is a little bit better than the other. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Bucs fans' takes are too. So for myself and for Mark Schofield, who's always kind and gracious to join the show and give us plenty of his time, thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.